Hello, my name is Rachel and I like making YouTube videos, and I was tagged by Cult's Santuary to do a 50 random facts about me video and I am going to link her channel down in the description box below. I'll link her video that she did on this down in the description box below. Definitely go check her out. She has a great channel. She does a lot of gothic fashion and witchy stuff and just really good content. Go check her out. Okay, so 50 facts. My bullet points actually kind of ended at 40, but I feel like some of these cover multiple facts. So the actual fact may be a little less than 50, or I may have come up with a little more than 50. We're not really counting, and I don't necessarily want this video to be too incredibly terribly long. Oh, and also this is a tag, so I'm supposed to tag people. Basically I'm gonna, if you want to do this video, I tag you. You are who I'm tagging. Whoever wants to do this video, I'm tagging you. These aren't really in any sort of order. I kind of tried to start out, doing them, when I was younger, and then as I got older, but then I started bouncing back and forth between time periods. So there's really no rhyme or reason to the way these are set up. So here we go. Number one, or let's start with, in first grade, I read Call of the Wild and White Fang and became obsessed with dogs and wolves. I was a dog person when I was little. We had dogs when I was growing up. I'm a cat person now, but back then I was all about the dogs, and I literally thought I was a dog and spent a lot of time running around barking and howling. And like when you're in like primary school, it's always like, let's play family. I was the family dog. And the barking and howling didn't stop until my early 20s. So that's a fact. Next, also when I was little, I was obsessed with Robin Hood, and I really wanted to be Robin Hood. My father even got me a compound bow, and I murdered a whole bunch of hay bales in the backyard. And then at one point I even was planning on, it's like when I'm old enough, I'm gonna change my name to Robin. But of course that never happened. As I got older, I grew into my name. I like my name. Rachel, I think is a good name for me. I feel like I'm a Rachel. So I'm good with sticking with Rachel, but I did want to change it to Robin, and for a while I also wanted, I don't have a middle name. There's another one. I don't have a middle name at all, but I used to write Ray, and actually when I first got my driver's license, because they didn't ask for a birth certificate or something, but I got away with writing Rachel Ray as my name, and then it took me having to bring them my birth certificate to get that removed when I grew up a little bit more and wanted that off, because that's not part of my legal name. I have no middle name. Oh, also when I was young, the only thing I ever wanted to be when I grew up was a ninja assassin. And I did take some Taekwondo in high school. Took it for probably a couple of years, but it also came to the conclusion that I'm not very coordinated or athletic or flexible. None of those things come naturally to me. So I had to give up on ninja assassin dreams. And then I never really had a plan after that. I've spent my whole life just sort of winging it. The first time I moved out of my parents' house was at 18. That didn't really go super well. My first apartment we were evicted from because I moved to Northern Virginia, which was very expensive, and I was working at a Wendy's, and the girl I moved with wound up losing her job and not getting another one, so we were evicted. And I spent that summer couch surfing and living out of my car, and I actually didn't speak to my parents. I feel so bad about this, but I actually didn't call or speak to my parents for an entire year because I just didn't want to admit how badly I had been screwing everything up in that time frame, and I'm sure they were incredibly worried about me. So I'm a little ashamed of that, but that's something that happened. The first time I ever went to a goth club, I was 18 years old. It was right out of high school when I moved to Northern Virginia. And those first couple of years we were going out, it was, if you're from DC, in the 90s, you'll probably remember all this. It was Monday nights was the Fifth Column, it was like a normal dance club, but in the basement they had a goth industrial night on Monday nights. You'd have to walk through all the normal dance club type music stuff to get to the stairs to go down to the basement where all the goths and industrial people were. And then on Wednesday nights we had the Roxy, which another goth industrial club. And then on Thursday nights was Trax, and Trax was a gay bar that had their goth and punk night, straight night on Thursday night. So that was the beginning of my clubbing for a couple years there. There were actually 3 places to go just about every week, and then a lot of, over the years, a lot of those clubs stopped doing those nights, and then we'd move on to different nights. It feels like the nights are a little more sparse these days. There's still a monthly event, at least one monthly event in DC. I think there's a couple of monthly events in DC still. There is, of course, Fallout here in Richmond, Virginia, where I live, which is a 24/7, 365 goth fetish alternative club. And there's there are goth nights like spread out. There was one in Williamsburg for a while, but I don't know if she's bringing that back. There was one in Charlottesville for a while, but that one had to stop, unfortunately. And there's still one in Portsmouth, Newport News area. There's still one out there. So there are still some clubs that I can go to, but like I said, these days it seems to be more like the bigger events, like the Dark Side of the Con or the Gothic Cruise or big shows, stuff like that. My first cat as an adult that was mine, her name was Cracker, and she was solid white, and I had her for 13 years, and she got out one day and never came home. And I've told that story before too, where I have some guilt about that because I came home a little too intoxicated and I didn't shut the door all the way, and that's how she was able to get out. But, and probably why I overspoil my current cats and also worry about them way too much. I am a Cancer moon with a Taurus sun and Virgo rising. And I really have no idea what any of that means, but I did have to look all that up to do some online test once. I've never had a relationship that's lasted more than 3.5 years. And let's see, I've been dating since I was 18. I didn't start dating until I graduated high school and moved out of my parents' house up to Northern Virginia. So I didn't start dating until I was a late bloomer. But I've been dating since I was 18, so that's 31 years of dating, and I've never had a relationship last longer than 3.5 years. My first major, I worked a ton of small jobs. My first major long-term job was I worked for a Rubbermaid factory in Winchester, Virginia for 8 years through the 90s into the early 2000s. And it was an injection molding factory. It was really hot in the summer and really cold in the winter because obviously a huge warehouse factory with these hot injection mold machines. They're not going to be able to temperature control that. It was pretty intense physical labor. Some of the jobs were fine, weren't that big of a deal, but some of the jobs were pretty intense physical labor. So I was in pretty good shape when I was working that job. And yeah, like I said, that was most of the 90s. I started, I think, in 94 or 95 and worked there until 2002 maybe. But that's the longest I've ever held a job. After that, my average is 5 years at a job. The job I just left, it's been about 5 years. I spent a season working on a Christmas tree farm. We would get there at 5 in the morning. The crew in front of us would cut the trees down, and then my crew would go through. We would put them in these little web bag machines to bag them up and then stack them on a flatbed trailer. I sold Sleep Number beds for roughly 5 to 6 years. And it was a job I was surprisingly good at. I even was the top salesperson one year in volume, not by percentage, but by volume. So I actually got to go on some trip to San Francisco. So that was a fun time. It was one of those jobs that when I started there, they were still kind of a smaller company and they were so good to their employees. But as they got bigger and bigger and more corporate, they started taking stuff away from us employees, so their shareholders would get more money, and then trying to lie to us about how they were, these changes are for the better, when you did the math quite clearly we're taking a 30% pay cut because it was a commission-based job. Well, one of the very few awards I ever won in my school career, I did not go to college, so kindergarten through high school, one of the very few awards I ever won was a literary award for a report that I did on Edgar Allan Poe in middle school. So I've been into this dark stuff for a pretty long time. Something that some of these facts, some of you guys probably already know because I've mentioned them in the past, but another fact is my one plastic surgery was breast augmentation, and they actually are turning 21 years old this year, so they're finally old enough to drink. There's a sci-fi show called Magicians, and I have friends, they're twins, who are actors, actresses, and they actually had a small role in the very first episode of Magicians. And in that episode, they actually wore I had made them these chainmail watch chains with pocket watches and a couple of other small jewelry pieces, and they actually wore some of my jewelry. So some of my chainmail has actually been in a, I guess like nationally syndicated TV show, The Magicians. They also, the same twins, also wore some chainmail tops I made for them in a horror comedy they were in called The Devil's Acid. So I also had some of my work in that movie. thanks to Kim and Misty. They're actually the twins that played the League twins in the Hunger Games. So that's my little, what's that called when name dropping? That's my little name dropping tidbit. But they are amazing people and really good friends. I love them to death. Something else I've talked about previously, but I'll mention again here. Actually, some of my scale mail tops were sold through Dolls Kill a couple of years ago. That was an interesting experience. Apparently they have buyers that scour Etsy and look for small independent creators, and I'd gotten this message from this person who's like, hey, I work for Dolls Kill and we'd be interested in buying some of your tops wholesale and selling them on our site. And at first I was like, this has got to be some sort of scam, but I looked her up and I found her LinkedIn and found out she really did work for Dolls Kill. And so they sold my tops 2 years in a row. The first year was when I was doing what I'm doing right now. I was taking a year off of actual like traditional employment, and so they reached out to me at the perfect time. That was the first time they reached out to me, and I wound up making, I think it was 4 styles of top and a headdress for them. And the second time around it was just 2 styles of top. And the second time around, the tops also weren't quite as creative as the first round. But I was working at that point, I was working full time, so I had a little less time to put into it. But on the one hand, I'm really proud that my tops were sold on Dolls Kill, and on the other hand, I'm really sad because Dolls Kill then did some fuck ups and kind of got canceled. So then it's hard to brag about it because nobody likes Dolls Kill anymore. Completely useless skill I have, but I can tie a cherry stem in a knot with my tongue. It's like a bar trick that a bartender taught me at my first job when I was 18. Oh, I haven't had an actual haircut since pre-COVID. I've just been trimming it myself, and I really need to get a real haircut at some point. Oh, obviously purple is my favorite color. I worked part-time for Hellsberg Diamonds for 6 years, so I did all the courses for gems and diamonds, although I probably don't remember much of that information now, but I was a certified, however they certify you. It was like these huge notebooks and courses that you had to take, and they paid for the courses. So it was like, it wasn't just through Hellsberg, it was through an association. So, but what I learned from that is I don't understand the value of that type of jewelry, I guess. Like $10,000 for a tiny little stone on my finger. I don't know. And especially for like, I totally get it if you have the money. If you have the money, I totally get it. Like, I'm crazy about clothes. We all have the things that we love and we collect. So if you have the money to spare, totally get it. But I never understood like 2 young people just starting out, not from families with money, where the girl insists on getting like a $10,000 ring. Like, that's a down payment on a house. Start your wedding out with maybe a $500 ring, get yourselves a house, and then later when you're both, secure in your jobs, upgrade the ring. But that's just my personal opinion. Different things are important to different people. Another job I was a manager of a bank. I was an assistant manager for PNC Bank for a year. It was a terrible experience. Banking is like retail, but even less ethical. even less ethical. It's basically a sales job, just less ethical because you're messing with people's finances. I did not enjoy banking at all, and I only lasted a year in it. I thought I was getting out of sales, and it turned out I was getting into even worse sales. I once visited Israel. I have a friend who lives in Israel, and I visited her in Israel and got to float in the Dead Sea. Now this is something that a lot of you guys that have been with me for a while know, because I did an entire video on this subject. But my ex-boyfriend left me for a murderer, and the murderer was actually featured in a Discovery Channel true crime episode. and like I said, I actually did a whole video on that story. If you don't know about that and you are curious, I'm going to try to remember to put it up in the card somewhere. Oh, and another ex-boyfriend story that I also made a whole video on that was just amusing was about the ex who broke into my house because he missed the cats. And I don't know if I can double like card movies, but if I can figure out how to put another card in here, I'll put a card for that one up here as well. But that one's more of the funny story. The being left for a murder, I get a little bit kind of, I guess, sad in that one because I was still recovering and still emotional about the whole situation at that point. But the ex that broke into my house, he and I are still friends and everything worked out fine. It's just a funny story at this point. Oh, I used to pick up hitchhikers. I don't anymore. I've watched way too much true crime. I no longer pick up hitchhikers, but there was a time in my life where I would pick up hitchhikers. When I was little, I had a pony. In my 20s, I had a motorcycle. I still have the M class on my driver's license because apparently you don't need to take the tests again after the first time, and the M just keeps carrying on. So even though I haven't been on a motorcycle in probably 20 years and wouldn't know what to do, I'm technically legal to drive one. I pierced my own eyebrow. I did this myself. I'd actually, if you can see, there's a scar next to it. I had done it once before, years before, but that one my body rejected and it grew out. So I had redone it. This probably about 10 years ago now. The first time was probably like 20 years ago, but yeah, like 10 years ago I redid it, and yeah, no, this one stayed. So this one was good. I also, although I never wear earrings, I have like 3 holes in this ear. And I did them myself. I was working in a jewelry store that had ear piercing, not Hillsburg. They're actually a fine jewelry store. But this was a similar to a Claire's, but it wasn't a Claire's. It was like something that's long gone out of business. I think it was called the Earring Tree. But yeah, so I did these piercings myself, and they're all in this ear because I'm right-handed. I've been vending, doing the vending thing at nightclubs since the early 2000s, although initially I wasn't selling stuff that I made. I actually had a wholesale account with Lip Service and was buying all their clearance stuff, because mostly with a wholesale account you would have to buy 3 of each size of a style, but in the clearance section it was like free-for-all, so you could buy singles of stuff. So I would go in and buy their clearance stuff so wholesale clearance prices were really good, and then I would go resell that at nightclubs in DC. Primarily it was called Midnight at the Meeting Place. It was Catacombs and then it was Midnight, but both of those were at a little bar called the Meeting Place in DC, and that was the first places that I actually did the vending at. But I also vended at other clubs like Nation and Spellbound. So I've been doing the vending thing in one form or another since the early 2000s. I actually started selling goth clothes, also sort of a buy and resell thing, on eBay. Started that like in '98. So I've been doing the reselling thing for a long time, but I only just, I would say around 2010 is when I started with the chainmail, and then started making my own stuff to sell. Started selling primarily stuff I made as opposed to resale. Really quick, I have a tongue piercing. Obviously not going to show you, but I have a nipple piercing. I have a belly button piercing, but I do not have any tattoos. And these 3 piercings were all done by a girlfriend of mine. She was an apprentice to be a piercer, so she had the proper equipment and everything, but we did it in our house. The belly button was in the kitchen of one of the houses that I lived in. The other 2 were in her bedroom of a house that we once upon a time shared in Sterling, Virginia, a very long time ago. I cry really easily. I mean, like any Disney cartoon, dog food commercials, look at me funny, I'm a crier. I get very emotional. And yeah, I cry a lot. I mean, completely obvious and a stereotype, but Halloween is my favorite holiday, mostly because I love all the Halloween themed stuff I can go buy. Completely useless bit of trivia. My birthday, June 27th, is the same date as in Shirley Jackson's story, The Lottery. I don't know if you're familiar with The Lottery. It's you know, a short story about a village that once a year picks someone to sacrifice. But the lottery takes place on June 27th, my birthday. So that's completely useless, meaningless information, but there you go. Oh, I once sat in Lincoln's lap. Like, once upon a time in the early 90s, before 9/11, there wasn't any security on the mall in DC. You know, the mall in DC is where all the monuments are. And there wasn't any security on the mall at night. So you could literally go and climb up on Lincoln. And I was with a group of friends. I even had one who climbed all the way to the top and like put his hat on. And there was this random person who just happened to be walking by who filmed all this and said that he would mail us a videotape because, you know, this was back in the early 90s, so it's not like he could take it on the cell phone and instantly send it to us or anything. But we never got the videotape. But that exists somewhere out there in the world, maybe still, unless he recorded over it. Me and my friends climbing on the Lincoln Memorial. I imagine that was probably illegal. I'm not sure if I should have admitted to that, but that was back in the early 90s. You can't do it anymore. They have security 24/7 and a fence up around Lincoln now. As a child, I actually won $100 in Hasbro toys. And I won that by, there was a Disney contest where you drew a picture of you with your favorite Disney character playing your favorite game. So I drew a picture of me playing hide and seek with Todd, because there's a scene in The Fox and the Hound where Todd and Copper are playing hide and seek. So I sort of duplicated that scene because that was like my favorite movie. I was obsessed with that movie. And I was obsessed with foxes. And yeah. But I won $100 in toys. And the sad part about that was it was months before I developed my obsession with G.I. Joe, and I could have spent that $100 on G.I. Joes, but it was months before I discovered my obsession with G.I. Joe, so I wound up spending it on just like some weird random Hasbro game things. I don't even remember anymore what all I got. And I guess my final fact, like I said, I have no idea, this might have been more than 50, it might have been less than 50, I don't know. But my final fact that I'm going with is, this is actually the third time I've saved up my money to take a full year off of normal employment. Although this is the first time that I'm actually going to attempt a actual self-employment thing with it. In the past, I would still use my hobbies and stuff as some supplemental income, but I wasn't trying to make a living out of it. So this time is different in that I am going to try and take this year to figure out how to make a living out of it. But if it doesn't work, I'll have to just re-enter the workforce in a year. But this is the third time. The first time that I took a whole year off, within the first 2 months, I went to the Bahamas 3 times. There was this resort in the Bahamas that it was like, for like $800. It covered your entire week, all your food, all your drinks. It was all inclusive. And like I said, I'd saved up a bunch of money, so I went 3 times with 3 different friends each time, with a different friend each time. And they were like, the people at the resort were like, "Weren't you just here?" I'm like, yes, I was. That was a good time. And then the second time I did it was when I first moved to Richmond. I took that first year off, basically, that I was here, because the house needed a lot of work and just wanted to be able to get all that done. And then at the end of that is when I started the night shift job. I just recently left, so I had been with them for all that time. But yeah, I guess that's everything. That's probably, like I said, it's probably more than 50 once you break down. Some of these had multiple little facts within them. But I hope that was interesting and entertaining for you, me sharing some. I guess a lot of this I was sharing was kind of stories, huh? But I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of this. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy it, of course you can give it a thumbs down, and please tell us all about it in the comments below. And please subscribe to the channel. And one more time, if you're interested in doing this, I tag you and you and you. So whoever's interested in doing this, you are tagged. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope everyone is just staying happy, healthy, and safe in this incredibly crazy world we're living in. And I will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.